we're about to switch gears, and you're about to get your first dose of, God, this sucks. Okay? There's no better way for me to articulate it, okay? It's just, we're about to get into the concepts, which you're not going to like them. Okay? They're going to bother you. And so here's the thing that you have to understand, all right? The concept that I'm about to teach you, it's not a hard concept. It's not. You're just not going to like it because you have probably never heard this terminology in your life that I'm about to teach you. And that's what makes it difficult. Because as I'm teaching it to you, you're hearing it for the first time. And if I just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, you're going to be like, oh, okay, this makes good sense. But when I first introduce it, you're not going to like it. Do understand that it is testable, but there's not a crazy amount of questions. And don't let it hurt your feelings, all right? You're not going to like it. Everybody okay with that warning before we move into this? All right? And so let me start with a terminology that you need to know. And it's a word you've heard before, but I'm going to have to give you a little more insight into what this word actually means. The word is estate. Okay? Estate. Of course you've heard that word. An estate sale. Real estate. Okay, you've heard this term. But when we're talking about this class, you need to think of the word estate as what level of relationship or legal interest does somebody have with a piece of property. Okay, that's what the word estate means. What is your legal relationship to a piece of property? Or, in other words, what is your legal interest in a piece of property? So, estate just means legal relationship. Well, folks, can we all agree that if you own a piece of property, you have a relationship to it, or you have an interest in it? You agree? Can we all agree that if you're renting a piece of property, you have a relationship to it? Sure. Now, I asked you last week, if you're renting, do you own it? And the answer is no. You have rights when you're renting property, right? Remember when we talked about the bundle of legal rights, the deep C? When you are a tenant, your relationship to that property is you have temporarily purchased the right of exclusion, the right of enjoyment, and the right of possession. And so that's exactly how we break up these estates, okay? These estates. Estates of ownership and estates not of ownership. We call the estates of ownership freehold estates. We call the estates not of ownership non-freehold estates. And we also call them leasehold estates. Okay, it's in the name. If you are leasing something, you have a non-freehold estate, also called a leasehold estates, or a leasehold estate. If you own something, you have a freehold estate. So, here's where we're going to go down some rabbit holes, and I'm going to introduce things you've never heard of in your life. Now, I want you to understand something, okay? Listen to me. Do any of you in here own a Lamborghini? I know, Adriana, that's such a silly question, right? Why would this man ask us if we own a Lamborghini? There's a method to my madness. Folks, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say none of you own a Lamborghini. Why? Why don't you own one?
Cost.
They're too expensive for most of us in here. I agree. Everybody okay with that? We're not shaming anybody. Lamborghinis are ungodly expensive. You all agree?
Yeah, I was going to say it wouldn't make it down my dirt path.
Well, just one of the many reasons. I'm sure you don't own one, Misty, right? Here's the reason why I asked that question. Say what, Josh?
It's a depreciating asset.
It is a depreciating asset. But let's be honest, for most of us, it's because we couldn't even fathom paying that kind of money for a car. And so here's what I need you to understand before I start talking about this question, or this section. Folks, just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. There are plenty of people who own Lamborghinis, and we will never understand it because we will never have that kind of money. So when I teach you this section, you're going to be like, I don't understand why this exists. Because people richer than you needed it to exist. Does that make sense for everybody? You've got to separate yourself from just because it doesn't make sense for you does not mean it doesn't make sense. You'll see what I mean in just a second. Hey, I'm rooting for you, Jacob. My my 7-year-old keeps telling me he's going to be a YouTuber and that he's going to buy a Cybertruck and a Lamborghini and a Aventador and all these. And I'm like, good for you, buddy. I hope so. So then I can retire, right? I'm hoping my son does that. So let me give you a long visual here, okay? This has a lot of information. Don't panic, okay? I'm going to just talk you through this, and then I'm going to give you some slides to back this up. Now, just listen first, and then, of course, take notes after. Because what I find is sometimes if people are so focused on taking notes when I'm saying this, that you're not actually understanding what I'm telling you, okay? So I told you estates is just what level of ownership, interest, relationship that you have with a piece of property. And so we can break that into two broad categories, these freehold versus non-freehold. Now notice how I don't have anything coming off the non-freehold, also called leasehold. We'll talk about that later. I want to focus on the freehold now. Freehold is ownership. I own it. Okay? I own it. Well, when we get into ownership, there are more than just the straightforward types of ownership that we think about. And so yet again, there are reasons these things exist. It just may not be pertinent to us. So let's start on the left side. Right here, this is how most of us own property. If you own a house right now, and you look on your deed, it will say that you own your home, most likely, fee simple. So, fee simple, also known as, here's one of those synonyms, right? Fee simple absolute. If you are dealing with the test and it says fee simple or fee simple absolute, they mean the same thing. Okay, let's group these together. Now, of course, there's subcategories. So this is what we like to call in the real estate class the highest and best form of ownership. Okay, highest and best form of ownership. Now, I asked you last week if you could do anything you wanted with your property right now. And what did you tell me? You told me no, right, Justin?
It depends. Depends.
Depends is always such a great answer. But Justin, why can't you do whatever you want with your property?
Because I have an HOA.
Because you have an HOA. We call that private land use controls. The other reason y'all told me last week is because the government controls. Yeah, there you go. Because the government controls part of it. So folks, understand that when I say fee simple absolute, it is the highest and best form of ownership. You can do whatever you want with your property within the scope of public and private land use controls. Just because you own it fee simple absolute does not mean you can do everything. But it does mean that your ownership is pretty up there, okay? You can do just about anything you own as long as it doesn't violate your public and private land use controls. This is going to make more sense as we go along. So most of us own our properties as fee simple absolute. Now, here's where I've got to throw in something that you're going to like. You know, like when you like talk to a dog and the dog gets a little confused and they do this thing right here. They go, "Rrr." This is where I got to introduce a concept, and every single one of you are going to do that. You're going to go, "Rrr." All right, and then I'm gonna make it make sense. This side is ownership. It's called fee simple defeasible. It is a type of fee simple, and it's got another name for it. But here's what you have to understand about fee simple defeasible. It is an ownership type that is so unique that you could end up not owning the property anymore. There are rules imposed upon it that if you don't follow them, it's not your property anymore. And I want you to think about this word. What does this word sound like? Defeasible.
Like a reduction.
Reduction.
Like defeated.
Defeated. Defeated. Folks, this is ownership, but it's ownership where you could defeat your ownership. If you don't follow the rules, you could defeat your ownership and you don't own it anymore. That is a very unique type of ownership. So this is also what we call qualified fee. And so yet again, think about the root word, right? To qualify. You have to qualify for your ownership, or your ownership could be defeated. You will absolutely see both those terminologies on the test. Qualified fee, fee simple to feasible, they're the same thing. So they are estates of ownership. You do own it. But if you do not follow a set of rules, you could not own it anymore. You could lose that ownership. Seems like a weird concept already, right? You're like, well, why don't anybody want that? Just wait. Gets weirder.
Seth,
Yeah.
can you please give me an example of fee simple to feasible?
No, Misty, I just want you to use your imagination, and I'm never going to explain anything in any way, shape, and form about it. Of course, I'm going to give you an example. Hang tight. I'm going to give you lots of examples. So, when we're dealing with fee simple to feasible, also called qualified fee, there are two subcategories. Okay? Fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. It's a mouthful. Sometimes they just shorten it by one word to fee simple subject to a condition, but the full legal terminology is fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. Okay, so these are two different categories of defeasible, also called qualified fee. And these are all types where if you don't follow a set of rules, you're not going to own it anymore. Now, Misty so kindly asked for an example, and I'm going to be happy to give you one. However, I'm going to let you take a break before I hurt your brains anymore. Work your way back. Get your cameras back on so we can explain some of these fun-filled estates concepts for you. Lots of fun-filled things to learn tonight. So, as you get back, we're talking about estates. Remember, estates, I said, just means some type of ownership or interest in a property. Okay, and we're focusing on the left side, okay? We're freehold estates, which are estates of ownership. And then more specifically, we're going down the fee simple side of things. Now, there's a couple different ways that these can be broken apart and categorized, and I'll get into that more in just a second. But what we're talking about right now, okay, when I said fee simple absolute, highest and best form of ownership, there are no restrictions other than public and private land use controls. And even then, you have to understand that public and private land use controls are not a strong enough restriction to ever cause you to lose your ownership of a property. But looking at this side, okay, this fee simple defeasible, also called what? What was the other name for it?
Fee simple absolute.
Nope.
Conditional subsequent.
Nope.
Was it qualified?
Qualified fee. Qualified fee. Now, this is why really, folks, this is why this section is so difficult. Number one, you've never heard these terms before. Number two, they all kind of sound similar, right? I mean, if you look defeasible and determinable, one is a subcategory of the other, but they sound so similar. So it's just, this is really going to be like, make flashcards and quiz yourself on this crap, because it's very easy to get lost in these terminologies, okay? So fee simple defeasible, also called qualified fee, is ownership, but it is ownership where we have restricted your use of the property. There are these restrictions put on it, and these restrictions are so powerful, if you don't follow the rules, you could lose your ownership. Now, let me give you some examples. You have to understand the two different categories, though. When we're dealing with fee simple determinable, we have determined the allowable use for your ownership. So if I say, I'm giving my property to Monica, and Monica can use it so long as she only ever utilizes it as a horse farm. I have determined the one allowable use. Monica is the owner, but Monica can only do what I told her she can do. Use it as a horse farm. Does that make sense for everybody? Now we're going to get into some concepts in a minute about property going back to somebody, okay? When you mess up and it goes back to where it started, that is called to revert or reversionary interest, okay? So let's say that I gave Monica a piece of property. I said, Monica, you own this so long as you only ever use it as a horse farm. Well, you would say Monica owns it fee simple determinable, so long as she only uses it as a horse farm. But if Monica breaks the rules, one morning she decides she's going to use it as a wedding venue. She doesn't own it anymore. And so it actually is automatic reversion. I now legally own it again. I don't got to go to court or anything. The way that the law is written for this, it just automatically reverts back to me. The second she stopped using it for the one allowable use, it reverted back to me. I'm the owner again. Now, if I'm dead, it would be my heirs or assigns is what we call it, right? Whoever my next of kin is. So that is fee simple determinable. We've given you one allowable use. Do that or you automatically lose it. The other one, fee simple subject to a condition or fee simple subject to a condition subsequent is the full mouthy, lengthy version of it. It's basically say, do whatever you want as long as you don't do this one thing. So I give Tim my property. Tim, you own this so long as you never sell alcohol on the property. So if Tim has a horse farm, he's cool. A hog farm, he's cool. As long as a church, he's cool. You know, a wedding venue would be fine too, but he can't sell alcohol on premises. Now, when he breaks the thing that he's not allowed to do, the interesting note is this one does not have automatic reversion. I would have to go by way of a court proceeding to get my ownership back, but I would get it back.
So no bootlegging, huh?
No bootlegging. It's out, man, unless you're just really good at hiding it, you know? Now, this is where I told you, just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. Picture being a billionaire philanthropist. And when you die, you want to leave 700 acres to a facility or an organization that you love. You're going to put rules on it. They can own this so long as they only do this. They can own this so long as they never do this. Doesn't make sense for you because you're not Bruce Wayne. But if you were, this would make a lot more sense. What you got, Josh? Oh, you're unmuted. I thought maybe you were about to ask something.
Oh.
No, you're good. Now, let me give you an example of this. Now, folks, I promise there's going to be slides that accompany this, but I feel when I teach it this way and I just kind of walk you through it and you can just really hear what I'm saying, you have a tendency to better grasp this. So, have any of you ever heard of Dorothea Dix? Monica, you have?
Yes.
Yeah. Most of us are in the Triangle area, and so you've heard of Dorothea Dix. And so if you're not familiar, where it started, the Dix family was a very prominent family in North Carolina, and they were very wealthy. And they left this property that is now Dorothea Dix, and Dix Park, as they call it, to the city of Raleigh. Now, here's what you may or may not know. They left it as a mental health institution, Dorothea Dix Hospital. And it really wasn't a fantastic hospital in any way, shape, and form, but it did exist, and it was gifted to the city of Raleigh. Now, folks, Dorothea Dix was gifted by the Dix family to the city of Raleigh, fee simple determinable. It was theirs so long as they only ever used it as a mental health institution. Now, I'm going to teach you about another concept down the road, but I'm going to give you a mini lesson on it here. There is this concept called escheat. Okay, escheat. E-S-C-H-E-A-T. If you die without a will, and you have no next of kin up to a certain level to give that land to or anything that you had, the state will take it. And they say, okay, it's mine now. Because there's nobody to give it to. They will go through this line. It's called the law of intestate succession. So they'll go through this line of people, and if you have no one to give it to, they say, okay, yoink, it's mine. It's called escheat. Now, we're going to talk more about that later. So, here's the perfect example of this. The city of Raleigh was gifted the Dorothea Dix Institution by the Dix family, fee simple determinable, so long as they only ever used it as a mental health institution. And so the city of Raleigh, we're sitting there one time, and I'm embellishing a little bit because I don't know how the meeting actually went down. But the people who have these conversations were sitting there and they say, oh, God, doesn't it suck that this property is worth like $3.8 billion and we can only use it as a mediocre mental health institution? And they're like, yeah, man, it really blows. But hey, it was fee simple determinable. If we stop doing it as a mental health hospital, it will go back to the Dix family, this automatic reversion, okay? It'll go back to the Dix family. Somebody's like, oh, yeah, that really sucks. And then somebody's like, well, there's none of them left. I said, none? They're like, no. And they mean like none? And they're like, no. North Carolina is completely Dixless. Ain't no Dix left in North Carolina, okay? All the Dix is dead. Okay? Ain't no Dix. No more Dix. D-I-X. Nobody get weird, okay? No more Dix in North Carolina. They're all dead. And so here's what the city of Raleigh came to the conclusion. Here's what they figured out, folks. You ready for this? I said, oh, so what you're saying is if we stop using it, it'll go back to the Dix family. But there are no Dix family. And so here's what they did. They said, oops, we stopped using it as a mental health hospital, went back to the Dix family. Oops, there are no members left of the Dix family. And so the state of North Carolina just gained it by way of escheat. Oops, we just turned around as the state of North Carolina owning it fee simple absolute, and we sold it back to the city of Raleigh after we gave them the grant money to buy it back from us. And now they can do whatever they want with it, and the Dix family is rolling in their graves.
That's where I used to work at the Dix building for the state.
But see, now you can't say that with a straight face now that I said the whole thing, right? Dixless. Ain't no more Dix. All the Dix is dead.
That Dix hospital is creepy.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that it was not a fantastic facility. It was a little creepy in every way, shape, and form. So let me circle back around to the question that Sam asked, okay? And this is where, I've got to remind you, Sam says, well, why does it automatically revert to the owner in determinable, but not automatically revert to the owner in subject to a condition? The main answer is because I said so. I mean, that's really the main answer. But the better answer is, I'm sure it has to do with giving you time to correct it, right? When there's only one use, it's very obvious that you just blatantly ignore the rules. If we said you can do whatever you want but this one thing, it typically gives the person the opportunity to correct it before they lose that ownership, because it was a little more subjective. That's why. So if I go to court because, Tim was selling alcohol, Tim's going to be like, I'm sorry, I completely forgot. I'll stop selling alcohol. And then potentially Tim could keep it. That's why. Just because there's a little more gray area, because we said you do whatever you want but this one thing. So understand that every single one of these is in a state of ownership, okay? When I gave Monica the horse farm and said you can only use it as a horse farm, that's fee simple determinable. But Monica does own it. When I gave Tim the property and said do whatever you want so long as you don't sell alcohol. Well, he can do whatever he wants as long as he doesn't sell alcohol, but Tim does own it, okay? These are estates of ownership. And so one of the things that really comes into play here, one of the most testable things for whatever reason for these is, well, are they an estate of inheritance or not? What do I mean by an estate of inheritance?
Passed down from generation to generation.
Passed down from generation to generation. Yeah, what else are you going to say? So it means it can be willed to somebody, right? You can leave it to them. Now, I want you to understand that every single one of these that I just mentioned, all these fee simple subsidiaries, these are always estates of inheritance. They can be willed to somebody. So Monica and her fee simple determinable horse farm that I gave her. If Monica put in her will that upon her death she wanted to Monica, do you have kids? How many? You just hold up. Just one? Two? Two. There you go. Two, if Monica put in her will that she wanted this horse farm to go to her kids when she died, she can leave it to her kids. But I want you to understand, when we're dealing with things like this, you can never give more than what you had. So what would her kids have to use this property for?
A horse farm.
A horse farm. And if her kids didn't use it as a horse farm and they changed the use, what would happen to it?
Go back to the original.
It'd go back to the grantor, right? There's that word that we introduced last week, which is me. Or if I'm dead, my kids. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
So by the same token, Tim has this property that I gave him, and he can do whatever he wants as long as he doesn't sell alcohol. And Tim hates his kids, right? They're rotten little turd buckets. And so Tim says, I'm going to leave my property to Corey because he's my friend. And so when Tim dies, he leaves it in his will to Corey. And so Corey can absolutely inherit it. And Corey can do whatever he wants with this property except what?
Use it for alcohol.
Selling alcohol. There you go. Is this making sense? It's not as scary as it's sometimes made out to be, folks. You just got to kind of walk through it and understand. Now, every single thing on this side of these fees, fee always means inheritable. If you ever see fee, it can be willed. Now, unfortunately, that's not super helpful because the ones that are not inheritable, very seldom do they actually call them non-fee on the test. But if they were non-fee, then they would not be of inheritance. But fee means inheritance, okay? Fee can be willed. What you got, Sandeep?
So my question is, once you restrict something on the land, can you go back and change it later down the road?
It can be changed, but only the person who restricted it can change it. So could I change it and say, oh yeah, Monica, you can do whatever you want. I changed my mind. Sure, I could. If I could do that to Tim. Monica can't change it. Tim can't change it. But I can because I'm the one who put that restriction on there. That was the stipulation that was put on there when they were granted ownership.
I see.
Yep.
After somebody is granted sorry, I was just gonna say after somebody is granted ownership, and we're talking about how the grantee can go back and say never mind, you can do whatever you want with it.
The grantor.
Grantor. Could they go back and do kind of not the opposite, but could they add a restriction after it's already given?
No, because I don't own it anymore, right? If I gave this horse property to Monica, Monica is the owner. Now, understand, Monica could put additional restrictions as the owner. She just can't do anything that would contradict mine. So could she then go and put another restriction that says, well, it can only be for Clydesdales? She could, because that still meets my criteria, but I can't go back and change anything. Now, understand yet again that there are defaults for all of this. And so could you have a legal document that gives somebody the right to change it in an in time? Sure. If you hire an attorney and have him draft up some beautiful language, but without anything to the contrary, this is how this works. What were you saying, Stephanie?
I was going to ask, like, if Monica, say, defaulted on it and you had passed away and it went to your kids, could your kids change it or it would still have to be the same?
Nope, my kids could change it because it went back to the original grantor, so, or the grantor's heirs. They would have the right to change it.
Okay.
Yep. Because presumably when I owned it fee simple absolute. But when I gave it to Monica, I said, Monica, you only own it this way. So when it comes back to me, it's still fee simple absolute, which is what happened with the Dix family, right? The Dix family owned it fee simple absolute. They put this restriction on the city of Raleigh. So when they stopped using it and it went back to the Dix estate that doesn't exist anymore, it went back as absolute. And so when the government stole it back, they stole it back as fee simple absolute. This is why, that's why attorneys make the big bucks, because they write this crap that's supposed to be foolproof, and then some other fool shows just how foolproof it was. It's just ridiculous. So, yeah. So all of these are estates of inheritance. Yep, that's exactly right, Monica. It's cheated back to the state. And so because there was nobody left, the state of North Carolina got it by way of escheat. And so if you don't know this, the state actually, when it acquires property by escheat, it sells it at auction and that money is supposed to go to public schools just like the lottery system. However, this was a predetermined deal that the city of Raleigh got to buy it back. And then the state of North Carolina actually granted the city of Raleigh the money because it was something else. Good luck Googling it. It was not necessarily something that they were proud of, but it was a little, yeah. It did happen.
But now they have pretty sunflowers over
And now they have pretty sunflowers. That's right. But, screw the people with mental health issues, okay? Go look at the sunflowers if you're feeling bad, all right? I don't care that you got voices. Go look at the sunflowers, I'll make it better. What you got, Josh?
For these types of ownerships, who would be responsible for the taxes?
The owner, Monica, Tim. They own it. Understand that word ownership is ownership. They do own it. It's just I've restricted what they can do with it, but they own it. Remember, that's the whole point of freehold. These are all estates of ownership. Yeah, good question.
Until the grantor passes away or accepts.
No. They'll own it forever. So understand, folks, in theory, Monica and Monica's heirs could own that horse farm for the next millennium, okay? They could. She could leave it to her kids could leave it to their kids, and they will continue to pay taxes and they will continue to own it. Now, let me ask you a question here. Monica owns that horse farm that she can only ever use as a horse farm. Can she sell it?
Yes.
Yes, she can, but she has to keep the horse farm thing.
There you go. She can sell it, but it's going to be advertised as if you buy this, it can only be legally ever used as a horse farm. So whoever owns it is the owner. But it's just that these rules are so powerful that you could lose your ownership.
Right. And then it could revert back to the original grantor.
Yeah. It could go down 500 levels, right? It could be sold 500 times, willed 500 times, and if the 500th person screws it up, it would still come back to me and my heirs and assigns as the original grantor of this rule.
And then if there was a situation such as the Dix's family where there's no one alive within that lineage, it would just go back to the state locked it off.
Potentially. Yeah, I mean, if there was nobody left in the law, it's called the law of intestate succession. We're going to get into that in a minute. Dying without a will, they basically write one for you, and if they can't find anybody on that list, then they just take it by way of a cheat. That's exactly right.
Oh.
Yeah, and then they say sucks to suck, Chuck. Yeah. Excellent question. Let's be honest, Josh, you just wanted to say Dix's, didn't you? That's all you wanted. We just look back around, he's like, I just want to say the Dix's. There's no more Dix's. Yeah, that's okay, me too.
I didn't know Carolina.
Monica says transfer, by way of a deed. This is all transferred by way of a deed, showing that transfer of title, and this would all be outlined on the deed. So when you see it, right, like Monica's deed would say, Seth Chauncey as grantor and Monica Sandoval as grantee, and a fee simple determinable ownership where she only could ever use it as a horse farm as outlined on Exhibit A. It would all be outlined right there on that deed, and it would name that it would go back to revert back to me if she ever stopped using it as that. All outlined on the deed. Okay, but every single thing on this side is ownership. And understand, folks, that when we are limiting these ownerships, there's only two things we can limit for ownership. There is your use of the property, and there is the time that you will own the property. So I'm going to skip forward for a second. I'm going to come back to this grid here. If you think about it, all I did in fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to conditions subsequent, which are both types of fee simple defeasible, or also called qualified fee, is I limited your use. But as I said, Monica could own it for another millennium, or her family or her descendants could. I'm not limiting how long she owns it, just what she can do with it. So when we're dealing with ownership, the only things we can limit is your time that you own it or what you can do with it. That's it. So here's where I'm going to go ahead and give you the other kind of lecture, because I promise, as many times as I taught this, if I just kind of walk you through it, when you see it revisited on the slides, it really starts to click some more. And I'll come back to this slide as well, and remember that I just gave you the copy of these, so you can have these slides, so don't panic about the note-taking thing if you miss something.
Is there a place or is there like a term that we can Google where we can get the whole diagram that has like even the other parts to it?
Like this one?
Yeah, but it has like absolute, where it has absolute, but conventional, legal, homestead, dower.
No, unfortunately, there's not really fantastic. I mean, I had to kind of move this one around and create this one to the extent that I wanted it. There's not a lot of really fantastic like charts because once again, some textbooks group them together in different ways, some than others do. So like, this one is not grouped by estates of inheritance. This one is grouped by freehold versus non-freehold and then kind of some subcategories. So there's different resources out there, but I don't know that you'd find one exactly like what you're looking for.
Ethan, I'm sorry, you may have said this and I missed it, but is this national or is this
national? This is all very much national. Very, very testable on the national side. Yep. So let's go to the other side of freehold, okay? Remember, freehold is ownership. And so now when we travel this line over here, we've got what we call a life estate. This is another very abstract concept. And so a life estate is yet again ownership. But we are limiting the time that you own it. And so the two main categories that you need to know, of course, as Josh just mentioned, there's a couple other ones in there that come into play, like legal life estates, which are, synonyms with conventional. But the main terminology that you need to know is a conventional life estate and what we call a life estate per ultra V. Okay? Per ultra V translates to for the life of another. So let's start with the conventional life estate. A conventional life estate is where you give property to somebody so long as they are alive. So I say, Eliza, you own this property so long as you are alive. I'm not telling her what she can and can't do with it. I'm just telling her how long she's going to own it. Now, she is an owner, but she's not an owner indefinitely. She owns it for, you ready for this? Exactly for the life of one Eliza. When she kicks the bucket, it's not hers anymore. That is called a conventional life estate. In life estates, you've got two things you have to understand. Who the owner is and who is the, what we call, measuring life. In a conventional life estate, they're the same person. Eliza is the owner, and Eliza is the measuring life. She owns it so long as she is alive. And so when she dies, she does not own it anymore. And because of that, go ahead, Jacob.
Okay, I want to ask a question that kind of connects some things. So, when you own real property, right? Well, I guess first off, are estates and real property still considered like this, like the same? Like, or is an estate not real property?
Remember, estate is just what legal interest in something somebody has. And so if we're talking about an estate sale, it's just trying to work out all your legal ownership interest, your property ownership, and divvying it out. So these estates are different types of actual ownership, right? Like that we're all talking about right now. And so they'd be on a deed.
Okay, so with that being said, some of the in the bundle of rights that you get, right, you have the right to sell your house, right? You have the right to sell your property. That's one of the rights. If you're in this situation, right, I think you said Eliza was the example. If she has this property until she dies, but she owns this property because we're still under freehold, so she still owns it. Does she still have her full bundle of rights, right? But can she sell this? And if so, then when she dies, does the other person just lose ownership?
Not to pick on you, Jacob, but if you'd let me finish the thought, you'd have all these answers. You're asking good questions, but that's the whole point of being the teacher and teaching you things, right? You got to give me a chance to teach it before I can answer it, right? Or I mean, I can answer it now, but you're going to get there, okay? All will be revealed, I promise. So, in this example, Eliza is the owner, and she owns it until Eliza dies. Okay, that is a conventional life estate. So she is the measuring life, and she is a life tenant. Now, this is where I have to warn you, folks. It gets a little morbid in class because I'm for the next couple sections, I have to kill people a lot, not literally, but figuratively to help you understand concepts. Okay, and so we do not know how long Eliza is going to live, but we do know that it's hers so long as she is alive. Now, you have to understand that when she owns a piece of property, and she only owns it until she dies, the big question is, well, what happens when she dies? We're not going to just like make this a free-for-all where like everybody gets to go and like fight over this piece of property. That wouldn't make any sense. So there's one of two things that happens with the ownership whenever this life tenant passes away. It would either revert back to the grantor. Remember, I just used that terminology, right? Reversionary. It would go back to the person who gave it to you. Or we could name a third party that it would go to. That person is called a remainder man. Not to be sexist, this is called a remainder man. And so I could say, Eliza, you own this property so long as you are alive, but when you die, it will go to Jacob. And so Jacob would be the remainder man. Eliza is the life tenant. And this, folks, is why this is not and never can be an estate of inheritance. Because if Eliza has a will that says, I'm leaving this property to my kids, as morbid as it sounds, the second she stops breathing, it's not hers anymore. And wills don't kick in until you die. So that is what a probate is, right? Probate is where you look at somebody's wishes and you say, can we even uphold this? So if Eliza's will said, I want to leave this property to Justin, probate's going to say, no, she can't do that. It's not hers anymore. The second she died, it became Jacob's property because Jacob was named as a remainder man. Misty, you get excited about those questions, girl. What you got?
Okay, so who named Jacob the remainder man? Who did that?
Me.
The grantor?
Yeah, the grantor.
The grantor.
The grantor, yeah. That's it. Folks, none of this stuff ever would happen by accident. You would have to have an attorney draft up some very specific legal documentation that outlines this. In theory, if you had a piece of property and you wanted to name who was going to own it for the next 10,000 years, you could. It'd be a lot of writing. You'd have to pay an attorney a lot of money. Because what are they going to say? The firstborn child of this person. If not this person, then that person. If not this person, then that person. And then it goes to this person. And it goes to this person. If you wrote it out thorough enough, you could basically articulate what you wanted to happen to a piece of property for the next 10,000 years plus. Now, why would we care? Why would we do that? We wouldn't. But you could. What you got, Adriana?
So, if I have a property and I want to give it to my mom while she's alive, and then I can name another person to use the property after she dies, right? So did you say it cannot be a family member from my mom?
No, I didn't say anything about a restriction. It can be whoever the hell you want it to be.
Oh, okay. I thought that you could not.
You can't will it if you own it this way.
Okay.
But if you were the owner and you're creating the conventional life estate, you can name whoever you want as a remainder man. You can name whoever you want as the owner.
Okay, and next question. Who is responsible for the taxes of the property again?
Same answer as before. The owner.
The grantor.
No, the grantee, the owner.
Oh, okay.
Folks, yeah, that's what you have to understand. These are all ownership. Why would anybody other than the owner pay the taxes?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
For sure. Excellent question. What you got, Jacob?
Nothing.
You good? So, Let me take this a few steps further, okay? Let me give you the name that we utilize. And please understand, there are slides that are going to show you all this stuff. I just like to have a conversation because people get really scared of this section. In the conventional life estate, the names that we use, for the owner, we call them the life tenant. Do not let that freak you out. They are the owner, but we call them a life tenant because they will not own it forever. Much like a tenant will not be leasing a property forever. So they are the owner, but we call them a life tenant. And then the other person is called the measuring life. And so in a conventional life estate, the life tenant and the measuring life are the same person. Now, Jacob, you did ask a fantastic question a moment ago, and here's where I'm going to answer it. Or better yet, I'm going to have y'all answer it. I said Eliza owns this property so long as Eliza is alive. Okay, and let's say it's, a 20-acre parcel that I gave her. Do you think Eliza can sell this 20-acre piece of property?
It makes sense that no, she couldn't.
I'll use the word again. She's an owner.
Yes, she could sell.
What stops an owner from selling? But let's think about this.
I would think no because of the type of.
Because of how unique it is, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, it's.
So here's the deal, folks. Eliza owns it. She owns it for exactly the life of one Eliza. And she turns around and she puts a sign after she gets it. She puts a sign in the yard and she puts it for sale. And Kingsley comes along and he sees this for sale sign and he picks up the phone and he calls Eliza. He says, I'm interested in buying this property. Well, folks, here's the kicker. Eliza can sell it and Kingsley can buy it. However, when Kingsley looks her in the face and says, well, Eliza, this is a great piece of property and this is a great price. You own this fee simple absolute? And Eliza's going to say, oh no, I have a conventional life estate. And Kingsley's going to say, I'm like, a what? I didn't hear you. Speak up. She's going to say, a conventional life estate? And Kingsley's going to say, well, hold up. Wait a second. Before I buy this property, I got some questions. Number one, Eliza, do you smoke or drink? When was the last time you went skydiving? How healthy are you? How much are you charging? Because folks understand that if Kingsley buys this, Kingsley will own it for exactly the life of one Eliza. You can't give more than you have. Eliza was only slated to own it for her life. If Kingsley was to buy it from Eliza, Kingsley would only own it so long as Eliza is alive. So picture this, Kingsley gives her money and gets the ownership, and the next day Eliza gets hit by a bus. Kingsley owned it for half a day. And it sucks to suck Chuck. So you can sell it, but you won't own it forever. Here's the other thing that people get confused on. You can borrow money against it. But yet again, if you call the bank and you say, oh yeah, it's a conventional life estate, they're going to ask the same questions. Well, how much is it worth? Do you smoke? Do you drink? How healthy are you? When was the last time you went skydiving? And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll lend you $500 on it. Because they're not taking a big risk on something that you don't actually own forever. Because that's all we're limiting is your time. Everybody still following along here? I haven't freaked you out too much. You look like you had a thought, Josh.
I did. I was trying to figure out, I guess, how is this practice relatively much today, or is this something that we kind of see more with homes that were built prior to like the lead-based paint law?
So this is. None of these are commonplace. Well, the fee simple absolute is commonplace. All these unique ones are not commonplace, but they do have a time and a place. Let me circle back around, folks. Let me help you out here. You don't understand it all yet, but I'll use Adriana's example. What if you had a family member who, was elderly, or you wanted to look after them or something, and so you just wanted to make it super simple that, they own something so long as they're alive, and then when they died, it would go elsewhere. I'll give you a really good example of this when I teach you another concept. I can't quite get there yet because you don't know the full picture, but there are times and places where you might use this. It's typically special circumstances, right? Family members, things of that nature. Let me just give you a real easy one. If my brother had a son who was disabled, okay, and my brother was not doing as financially well as I was, and I wanted to help him out because my nephew, needed extra care, I could do something like grant him a life estate. Now, I'm not going to grant it to my brother because it's not my brother that I'm trying to help out. It's my brother because my nephew would be disabled, right? And so that's where this other one comes into place. This one, called a life estate per ultra V, is the life tenant and the measuring life are different people. So I could say to my brother, well, hey, I'm going to give you this piece of property and you own it so long as my nephew is alive. Because maybe he's not, he has some terminal illness. He's not slated to live as long. And I just don't want my brother to have to worry about it so long as this person, is alive. And so this would be a circumstance that you may consider doing this. And so I'll give you a couple examples as we get further into this. But a life estate per ultra V, remember I told you, translates to for the life of another. And so the life tenant is one person. The measuring life is somebody else. In this case, the life tenant's my brother. He's the owner of the property. Who's the measuring life? My nephew. If my nephew passes away, my brother no longer owns the property because that was the measuring life. Now, this is very important. Notice how on my slides I've got, well, this is sometimes inheritable. Well, think about it. What if my brother dies and my nephew is still alive? Legally, I've said my brother gets to own it so long as this person's alive. This person's alive, my brother's just dead. Told you this conversation gets more, but I have to kill a lot of people in this section. So he could will it to somebody because it's still his to own. Now think about it. Let's say that this brother wills that property to his son, my nephew. Now what do we have?
You have a property that may go intestate because the son probably won't be.
Well, not intestate.
Testate.
No, not that either.
So I would guess you have a life estate for the life of another. Is it a conventional life estate?
It's changed from a life estate per ultra V to a conventional life estate because my brother was a life tenant, my nephew was a measuring life. That's a life estate per ultra V. When my brother died and willed it to his son, he is now the measuring life and the life tenant. So now he has a conventional life estate. He will continue to own it so long as he is alive. See how that works?
What happens when he dies?
I told you, with a life estate, you either have a reversionary interest or you have a remainder interest. So we have either stipulated that it will go to a third party named a remainder man, or it will either revert back to the grantor. Now, the default is reverting back. If we don't name a remainder man and we don't say reversion, it's automatic reversion. So let's say I'm the one who gave it to him, and I didn't say who it goes to after. Once he dies, I get it back. That's what we call a reversionary interest. Yep. What you got, Jacob?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, my AirPod died like right as you called on me.
No worries.
Okay, so so say person A gives it to his brother for however long his disabled son is alive. But the two initial parties are older. So say, they die, right? Brother dies. and the grantor and the grantee both died, and now it's just left for the disabled son, right? He passes away, at which point, since it's not inheritable at this point, because now it's a conventional life estate, when he dies, it then goes to the state if there's not a third party.
No, they would they would have to be not 8 parties. So when we're going to get into this more in depth in a second. When you let's just use your example. I gave it to my brother as a life estate per Ultra V. My brother died. He willed it to his son. It became a conventional life estate. I'm also dead. When this kid dies, if we have not stipulated who it's supposed to go to, it would go back to my estate. And then they would look down 7 degrees, okay? They would look for my spouse, if I had one. If I didn't have a spouse, they'd look at my kids. If I didn't have kids, they'd look at my parents. If I didn't have parents, they'd look at my siblings. If I didn't have siblings, they'd look at my cousins. If I didn't have cousins, they'd look at my second cousin. And then it stops there. So they would basically look through all of those people for my relatives under the law of intestate succession is what it's called. And if there's nobody within those categories, and this is state specific, by the way, like you're not going to be tested on the categories of the law of intestate succession. You just have to know that it's a thing in each state, and it would have to go through the process. And if they can't find anybody, then the government would take it by way of its cheat, or the state would.
Gotcha. I just didn't know if, like your family, your descendants, if that was something that they would look at or not. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, it would go through that process. So I think I've kind of given you everything in a nutshell on this, right? Like this, I'm going to get some more in-depth conversations, but it's not as scary as it sounds. Okay, it's really not. It's just new information, and it's abstract information. So this is just, you got to just keep replaying it and replaying it and replaying it. But do understand that there are not a crazy amount of questions on this. Is this exceptionally testable? Yes. Is there a lot of questions on this? No.